Welcome everyone to the new episode of startAD Studio. Today we have with us Deb and Kelvin from Switch Automation. Switch Automation is a smart building platform, and I think Deb would be better able to explain more about Switch Automation. And Kelvin, you can take the lead too. Over to you, Deb. Let's start.
Sure. So thank you so much for hosting us, and also to startAD. It was a fantastic program, by the way. I really commend you all on that. So Switch Automation is a technology platform that helps large portfolio owners and operators to digitize the systems out of their buildings. So what that means is we connect and collect data from building systems, whether it's the building management system, the lighting system, the metering, IoT sensors, and we collect that all into one place because at the moment, the only solutions in the market are point solutions that do one of those things. So for example, the building management systems collect BMS data, the lighting system collect lighting data, and we collect all of that data in one place. And we apply analytics so that we can uncover opportunities for people that are managing buildings to reduce their energy, but also reduce their costs, to improve the performance of their teams and their vendors. And so we're saving money, but at the same time, we're also improving the environmental footprint of those buildings.
So how did Switch Automation came to be? What was that light bulb moment when you thought, okay, this is a space that we want to be in. This has a great potential and this has a great impact potential as well?
Well, my background is in enterprise IT. So through the 90s, my co-founder and I ran a series of businesses that were doing logistics and freight tracking for large enterprise companies. And we came across the world of building automation quite by accident. Somebody asked us to write an integration that was for a product that was being brought into Australia. And when I looked at the world of buildings and the way people were managing buildings, it just seemed to me that these were multi-million-dollar assets, and people didn't necessarily have the performance of those assets at their fingertips. They had data in spreadsheets, they had data in subsystems, their vendors had data. And to me, it looked like 1990. This was in around 2008. And so it just seemed like a gigantic opportunity to take advantage of how other industries have harnessed data, applied analytics, and opened those systems up to make it a more digital world.
Back in 2008, the cloud was still, people were still getting accustomed to the cloud. IoT wasn't there at all. And people were just used to seeing the software on their desktops or laptops. That's it. Not even on phones. I think the iPhone was out 2 years back at that point of time.
Right.
So how difficult was it to convince the clients that this is something you want to do? This will pay off in the future. And ESG goals, nobody was caring about them at that point of time. So how difficult was that conversation?
It was very difficult. Yeah, it was very difficult. We were well and truly ahead of our time. We actually developed the Switch platform in 2010, just as the first iPad was being released. So everybody had this concept that building data was stored on site in the buildings itself. It was not brought to the cloud. It was not. So there was all of these cybersecurity worries. There was concerns about what happens if the internet drops out. There was concerns about the business model. Nobody was used to a SaaS business model. So there was a gigantic period of educating the market around the benefits of these technologies, but also how these technologies worked, because we weren't dealing with tech people, we were dealing with operations people.
So a lot of our audience are aspiring entrepreneurs who are working on path-breaking solutions, which are completely radical. So what would be a suggestion to them in terms of, how can they start out? Because they will also face the same obstacles that you face, that people are simply not ready, and they might not necessarily have the same amount of experience, the same amount of resources. So what would be a suggestion to them?
So I think, firstly, if your solution is not unique, then it's probably been done before. And so if it's been done before, then you're not truly creating something that's what you would think of as entrepreneurial, And so if you're entrepreneurial, you have to accept the fact that you're stepping into the unknown. It's a frontier that's never been solved before. It's never been explored before. And so when you're doing that, it's you don't have the answers, but neither does anybody else. And so if you're really passionate about your idea, you'll figure it out along the way. It's truly a roller coaster ride, and there's ups and downs, but there is nobody better positioned to solve the problem than you, because you have the passion and the idea. And I mean, there's still gigantic companies being born every single day. And so there's no reason. And I always say to our team that it's a really hard thing, what we've done, but somebody has to solve it. And why not us? Or who else? Who's better placed to do this than us?
That's a really great mindset to have when you're starting your own company. But definitely most of these young entrepreneurs want to do it in a less risky way and solve it, although it's a risk, but it's always good to have to mitigate risk in some possible way. So do you have any suggestions on how can these entrepreneurs test out the market and still keep the risk at minimum and then take baby steps or cautious to move forward?
I don't have any great advice for that, but you have to find customers who can see through the challenges and see through the negativity and give you a chance. And so out there in the corporate world, for every person who's an entrepreneur and a tiny bit crazy like us founders, there's also people on the other side of the desk that will give you a go. They'll give you a chance. So you have to find people who are prepared to take a small amount of professional risk and to give you a chance to test your theory, to test your technology, to test your team. And when you find those backers, you have to go all in and make sure that you don't fail them, because they will actually be your biggest fans. If they take a chance on you, then you have to go all in and back them so that they become your champions within the enterprise. And maybe Kelvin's got a few things to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Deb. And in fact, if I might just quickly add on, the fact is that, when you start off as an entrepreneur, time is going to be money, and you have to be really tactical and strategic in allocating your time. So to Deb's point earlier, absolutely, you have customers is one thing, but also spend time in the geographies and also with the investors that will really understand the product, and with the regulators that will that have the vision to actually put forth a decarbonization plan, a net zero plan of some sort. For instance, like the UAE, they have a net zero goal as of 2050. And these will then inform, the smaller footsteps, that these entrepreneurs can then take. But as long as they have, set their paths in directionally, in the geographies, with the investors and with the customers that, truly understand the market dynamics, the industry, and are willing to give the product a shot, I think that's the first step, towards risk mitigation.
That's a great piece of advice, finding the champions across the geographies, across the companies. When you do it directly as a company, as Switch Automation, how's it different from doing it while you're in a program, in a market access program or an accelerator program? Are things a bit different? Are the audience different?
Well, I can talk specifically to your program. So I've done several of these programs, probably 5 or 6 accelerators and other types of entrepreneurial programs. What was highly valuable about the Aldar program was the fact that the company was still acting like a customer, but they also, opened the kimono and gave you insights into how they were thinking and what they were feeling, and they gave you direct feedback. So we were able to iterate through that process. So it was an incredibly valuable learning exercise in terms of selling to the enterprise, because selling to the enterprise is so much more difficult than selling to consumers. Consumers adopt tech all day, every day. I mean, we open up our phone and we see a new app and we adopt that. But with the enterprise, you've got to win over several stakeholders. Then you've got to get through procurement. Then you've got to get through the cyber and the IT reviews. It's a multi-step process. And so selling to enterprise is actually really challenging. So I think from my perspective, this program was particularly valuable because of that learning experience along the way. Selling direct, usually the when you're selling direct, you found a client who has actually acknowledged a need for your technology.
Yeah, so look, I would concur with that. I mean, the conventional way, is to, set up an office, get boots on the ground, and then you start going after, our first buildings. In the case of the startAD, accelerator, in this instance, right, we were able to, get to the core people quickly, understand their pain points, pitch our product, finalize our proposal and have airtime with the senior management, all within the time period of a month. And I cannot recall another accelerator where the efficacy of our time spent, at no financial cost, that number of productive meetings we held with a potential customer. That is something, I think that was of immense value to us, and it wouldn't be something that would be emblematic, had we gone the direct route. When you go the direct route, there's always a risk that, you may be talking to certain people within the organization, but whether they are the right people, that's always a question mark.
Thank you, Kelvin. That's exactly the kind of feedback we needed. And this was an intended design choice to enable companies to quickly launch into the UAE, test out the market, speak to the clients, do a pilot, and spread across the other clients as well in the region. So now moving on to changing a little bit of gears here. How did you come about this entrepreneurial journey? Like, did you ever think at any point in your career, Deb, that I'm going to be an entrepreneur? And same applies to you, Kelvin. Did you think that, okay, you know what, I'm going to start a company soon, or sometime in the near future? And how has that journey been so far? Has it been a rewarding experience?
Well, I think so. I'm of the mindset that entrepreneurial is a genetic thing. It's not, you don't teach entrepreneurs, because I think at the heart of it, you're either a risk taker or you're not. And I think that's genetic. So I don't think you can teach people to be entrepreneurs, because you can't really teach people to be risk takers. And I'll be interested in Kelvin's answer, because Kelvin spent 10 to 15 years in banking and could have had an incredibly lucrative career staying with a fairly conservative trajectory, but instead he leapt off that and into a startup, which is high risk. So for me, I think I come from a long line of, I can trace entrepreneurs through my parents and my grandparents. They were not as ambitious as I am in terms of their entrepreneurial efforts, but they were entrepreneurs nevertheless. So I think I was always going to be an entrepreneur, no matter what. And it could have been a corner shop, but I would have had my own business. But instead, I learned from the first 2 or 3 businesses that I had, which was honestly all about timing. The first business I started was in 1993. So I watched the internet drive incredibly large technology businesses using technology, not manpower. And I became fascinated with that idea that you don't have to have a workforce of 500 people to have $1 billion business. You can actually drive an incredibly valuable business using technology and scaling it cleverly, using proven techniques, really. But I'll be interested in what Kelvin says to this question.
Yeah, sure. So as Deb rightly pointed out, I worked with, the big organization, in both London and Hong Kong. I spent over 10 years within financial services, and worked from the MNC investment banks to a large, Chinese sovereign wealth fund. And, I believe what motivated me, to join Switch, I probably have to thank Deb for inspiring me to embark on this journey into the world of smart building and digital facilities management. And the reason is, I guess, twofold. One is, I think Switch has allowed me to step up beyond my core remit to push the company to achieve this broader mission of decarbonizing buildings. And the second, I think there's an element of poetry to this. So when I was an equities portfolio manager, I was previously covering and looking at all these large cap industrial names, which are actually now our competitors, and people we're actually looking to disrupt. So I left my several meetings with them, when I was speaking to her, thinking that there was going to be once in my career that I joined a technology startup bent on changing the world. This has got to be the plunge that I take.
So Kelvin, how does your day now look different from while you were a banker? So you wake up earlier, your entire day you're taking decisions after decision. How is it different now?
Yeah, well, in banking, the pressure is different. It's a volumes driven business. You are just, you're under constant pressure, to deliver on your deadlines, to get, deals across the line. And over here, at Switch, we are busy, but obviously, the work, and, I have to thank Deb again for this. There's just a lot more space and autonomy to really, drive towards the outcome. In banking, you just don't have time to think. You have to actually, block and tackle and just keep moving, to just get, deals across the line. Whereas here, you can actually, strategize. And I actually ask myself a question every day, which is, if there's 3 things that I can do, that I can help to achieve the company's broader mission, what would it be? And then allocate my time as such. So I think that's, the autonomy and, the freedom to actually allocate your time is really something, that I think is unique about Switch. And, that's something that I really relish, in this startup environment.
3 things that I can do today to take my company to another level. That's a great framework. I think that can be used by any employee in any setting and any founder in any setting. Now that you've spoken about technology and how companies are opening up to integrating technologies, I think a lot of technologies, Web 3.0 technologies are coming together really well. So how does it all, work with in the context of Switch automation? Are your residents and end consumers also opening up to having that kind of technology in their lives where they can not only, work with home automation, but something on a much larger level? You can integrate security, you can integrate other things as well. How does the future hold for Switch automation in that context?
I think what our customers are ultimately looking for, and it's still some ways away, but what they really want is self-managing, self-driving, so the equivalent of self-driving cars for self-driving buildings. They want buildings to be able to adjust to the number of occupants. They want to adjust to the type of use. So if you've got a large event, for example, that you should be able to, the building should adjust, but just naturally. It should adjust for weather events. It should adjust for the time of the year. And at the moment, buildings are commissioned when they're handed over, and sometimes that's 10, 15 years ago, and very little is changed in the way the building is controlled and managed from the day that it's handed over until years, decades later. And so that's where the opportunity is. If you look at COVID, most of the buildings around the world during COVID were completely unoccupied, but there was no way of those buildings being able to hibernate themselves. And so they just operated as if they were 90% occupied all the way through 2020 and 2021. And then when we started getting people back into the office and the regulators said we've got to have more ventilation, we actually turned up the ventilation and we caused those buildings to actually cost more. But still half those buildings are not even occupied. But the regulatory environment around COVID has said we've got to increase the ventilation. And I think geographies like the UAE, where you have very extreme climates, we've got to be smarter about how we manage that, these assets, and how we manage our precious resources.
Yes, so making buildings more adaptable and flexible for human needs instead of the other way around. So, back like 5 years back, whenever if you want to buy a piece of real estate, or even if you want to rent out an office, you go around looking for buildings which suits for my needs. And here, what your Switch automation wants to do is make buildings tailored to the needs of that occupant at that point of time. So that's a great proposition to have in this evolving space. Now, in terms of near future, what are the most ambitious goals for Switch automation? What are the new areas that you want to delve into?
So I think machine learning is huge for us because every building is commissioned with different equipment. Some have Siemens, some have Johnson Controls, some have Honeywell, BMS, but then they have Kone or Schindler elevators, they have Lutron or some other lighting. So every single building is a unique combination of systems And it's also a unique way it was implemented. So the people who actually commissioned those systems determined, what each of the points would be named and what the control schedules would look like. And so every single building is as unique as every single human being is unique. There's no such thing as a standardized way of deploying buildings. So for us, machine learning can actually harness these differences, but then put an overlay over the top to standardize how people see these buildings. And then we can actually start to standardize the way these buildings are managed. That, I think, is a huge thing that we can really harness, how machine learning is applied. And then taking that a further step, we can actually start to learn how a building operates, and we can adjust to make the building more efficient, more comfortable, and to save money.
And I think it's using this, building owners and real estate companies will also be able to drive higher revenue, not only save costs, but also drive higher revenue.
100%. This is not just about ESG and net zero. It's about a higher NOI. This every dollar that we save goes straight to profitability of that building.
Okay, so this holds a great future for Switch Automation in general.
Yeah.
And we will look forward to the growth of Switch Automation and track your progress. It was really great speaking with you, Deb and Kelvin, and it was really wonderful working with you in the program. We wish you all the best in the future, and thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you so much. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, AB.